10 minutes adrift.
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, but we've got to be given long enough to be able to say something sensible.
Yeah, I think we'll just cut into the next break because it wouldn't be fair to you, to this panel.
I think not. Maybe as you say, we get going.
And if not, we'll improvise as we go. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Right, well, thank you so much for your patience, and with many apologies for these technical issues, but it wouldn't be a conference if we didn't hit at least a little snag along the way. With that, good afternoon, and welcome back from the extended lunch break. This panel will be exploring artificial intelligence in the context of the air domain. My name is Sarah Grant-Clement, and I am a researcher at UNIDIR, and I have the pleasure to be moderating this panel today. So, the previous panels have touched on the application of AI to the land and maritime domains, and they have shown how the application of AI cannot be thought about in blanket terms, but that there are domain-specific considerations to take into account. And as with the other domains, the use of AI in the air domain can mean the integration of AI capabilities and command and control systems that support air-based assets, as well as the integration of AI capabilities directly into air-based assets. And these capabilities can differ and can include helping sort and assess data, to data fusion, all the way to decision support, or even decision-making abilities. And as these capabilities are set to evolve and expand as the technology progresses, we are also now at the point where we are no longer only discussing the integration of AI in singular aerial platforms, but as being integrated within a system of systems where crewed and uncrewed systems work together, such as what we are seeing in the European project Future Combat Air Systems, otherwise known as FCAS. At the same time, of course, as policymakers and users seek to keep up with the ongoing advances of AI and AI-enabling technologies, as well as evolutions in use, it is also necessary to bear in mind the serious ethical and legal questions that also emerge, not least how international law may be applied in complex future dynamics within the air domain, and how to ensure that we retain meaningful human control. To that end, I'm pleased to introduce you to our esteemed speakers to discuss these issues with us today. In person, we are joined by Air Commodore Bill Boothby, Honorary Professor at Australian National University, as well as Mr. Thomas Kroos, Head of FCAS, Airbus Defence and Space. And online, we have Colonel Jörg Rauber, Branch Chief, Planning FCAS, German Ministry of Defence, and Dr. Liran Antibi, Senior Researcher, Institute for National Security Studies. In the interest of time, I invite you to read their biographies, which you can find in the participant pack online. So as with the other panels, I of course wish to remind our audience, both in person and online, that you have the possibility of, and indeed are encouraged to, ask questions throughout the event using Slido, using the same details as before. And we hopefully will have the chance to get through as many of those questions during the Q&A session. And now, without any further ado, I wish to turn to our speakers and start off with a more general question with regards to the application of AI in the air domain. And more specifically, looking to what issues is AI aiming to solve within the air domain? And therefore, how is AI intended to be applied for these issues to be addressed? I propose that we start with you, Thomas, and then we turn online to Liran and Jörg, and then Bill, if you want to have any final words on that question, we'll end with you.
So, hope everybody can hear me. So, good afternoon also from my side, and glad to be here with all of you today. And thanks, Sarah, for the introductory words. AI in the airborne warfare domain, which is, I think, not much different than the other domains that we have heard yet from the more global expression. I mean, it's about information superiority. How do I get the appropriate level of information? How do I verify this kind of information that it's accurate? How do I do a proper mission planning? How do I execute those missions? And how do I basically do a certain level of assessment that what I'd like to do has basically been achieved? So in that context, as said, pretty much the same as we have been hearing beforehand also in the naval side. So the air domain is basically executing a task that it's been asked to do out of a political mandate, which is then broken down into an operational planning and also in a tactical planning on the tactical front end. So you will see that AI applications are not only used at the tactical edge on an asset going into an engagement, you will also see that, I would assume, in an air operations center, you will have the appropriate AI support in the future that supports decision makers in this area with the appropriate level of information and the appropriate decision-making capability. And from there, it will be basically broken down, going into the respective tactical assets, going into the engagements, doing what they need to do to make, with their available resources, the appropriate effect. As this is becoming more and more quicker in the recent days, so we try to accelerate this by a mean of AI, linking it with automation and also linking it with autonomy. And then we've been just discussing as well here on the two chairs that that's actually where the topic becomes interesting. Just AI by itself is giving you a certain level of information, but turning that into action via autonomous triggered sequence of events or autonomy related to that with decision making is basically the part where the interesting discussions start. How do we implement that from a technical perspective? So how do we get to the agility? Agility through combining different assets with different capabilities is one of the features that we want to use. And that's where we link with the tri-national program, FCAS, or Next Generation Weapon System, where we are trying to build a new manned fighter together with unmanned assets, each of them having individual capabilities. The fighter being more broadly in the sense of what it can cover in reach and military effects, and the unmanned assets being more specific, complementing the capabilities of the fighter. To be able to do that and to go into an engagement, of course, those activities need to be coordinated. And for this coordination, we will basically use mission planning and mission execution algorithms, which will be AI-based. So that is one of the challenges to see how can we implement that into this kind of collaborative approach to make it work and basically keep pushing it forward to reach the appropriate targets that are being given. So that's really going down into mission planning algorithms, predictability, so predicting what may happen, and also analyzing different courses of action, so sequence of events to happen that will then basically be hosted and executed by those assets. The other part of the agility is to coming up with the digital battlefield. So how can we resemble in the digital space to the accuracy as needed the real environment? So how do we sense what's going on with the various sensors that are spread not only on different platforms, but also ground-based, space-based, and wherever you get the information from? So how do you disseminate the data? how do you aggregate it, and how do you prepare it for the appropriate decision maker, so the human being with the appropriate, hopefully meaningful human control to take, based on this kind of information, certain decisions on what to do next. So also there will be various AI algorithms employed for kind of clustering, categorizing, identifying the appropriate means, and then out of that, given the appropriate tasking, you will basically define your course of action that needs to be taken. So you can see a broad field of topics that need to be addressed. As said, there are similarities definitely with the other domains that are closely linked to that. And if you want to do coordinated effects, I think it will not stop anymore at a singular domain. You will basically also go cross-domain with certain employments. From an airborne perspective, I mean, I have right now very clear requirements how to get an aircraft airborne. So if I want to certify an aircraft that I'm allowed to fly in civil airspace, there's quite a nice list that I need to fulfill of tasks, what my technological design needs to have to be certified. And as a technician, I'm basically searching for a similar checklist. And maybe my flight test pass gets into that. But what is a checklist from an ethical point of view? How can I make a system that is by those politicians that mandate a certain thing to happen, that they accept the means that are used to enforce this end state that needs to be reached are actually ethically compliant? So through discussions like this here today and other forums, I'm trying to aim to find out how can I generate this checklist, even for our project, but also basically more on a general way of standardization. So I hope that's something that combines us with the audience here in the room and also on the screens to really find out how can we generate this. And I would leave it with that for the first thing, asking my colleagues to kick in.
Thank you so much. We'll now turn to you, Liran. You're still muted.
Sorry. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me by video today. I'm sorry I couldn't join you in personal. As mentioned before, AI is a huge opportunity for all dimensions, but in my opinion, although there is similarity between the dimensions, the combination between air warfare and AI is the perfect one as for our days and for the near future, and it's for several reasons. First, I'll start with the continuous and successful use of remotely operated unmanned tools over a long period of time that has provided us with a valuable operational and experimental experience. This experience has led to acquisition of extensive knowledge about the advantages and challenges in operating unmanned systems in the area of dimensions. And of course, not only, for example, in airplanes, but also in systems like the Israeli Iron Dome. As a result, there is now a measure of responsible integration of artificial intelligence in this dimension, and I think it's important both for operational reasons and for responsible reasons. I'll continue with the compatibility between artificial intelligence and air warfare due to the high rhythm of the air power operations and the operational capability of AI. AI also enable the increase of safety, and it's very important in all dimensions, but especially in the air. Due to the fact that the air most of the time is free of obstacles, or at least less obstacles than in the land, for example, the aerial dimension has less friction between artificial intelligence and human systems or human systems. This reduces conflict and operational challenges, particularly in terms of man and unmanned teaming, and most of it, if not all of the interface remain on the ground. And it's really helpful when you want to learn the new technology and how to handle with it. almost the last thing that I'm thinking of is the improved intelligence capabilities, particularly through the integration of artificial intelligence systems that have brought about a significant transformation on the battlefield. The combination of advanced AI systems with air power, including older generation of manned aircraft, not involving AI, has resulted in very, very influential target precision rate. I have two examples. Now, one coming from the usage of the Ukrainian forces in AI-based systems that gather intelligence in order to launch effective attacks on Russian targets, despite not possessing such capabilities before the war, and the combination between off-the-shelf AI systems and different air power systems is really influential in this war. A different example coming from Israel, the IDF military operation in Gaza in 2021, in only 12 days, the IDF generated 200 high-quality targets, a quantity that previously would have taken an entire year to produce. And the implementation of artificial intelligence in intelligence processes allowed the IDF to achieve the same target production in only 3% of the time. This is really huge difference that actually influencing how you strike those targets and also what you can achieve during war. Was found as really effective, but it demanded a lot of changes that I will speak about maybe later. The last point, while I'm looking to the future, there is a potential for operating swarms in aerial dimension, and it's maybe a bit easier than in the other dimensions, particularly for the beginning of this concept, and it's hold a promise for leading the way in swarms operation, which is something that may be very effective on the battlefield. I will finish with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jörg, we'll turn to you now.
Yes, I hope everybody can hear me. Also, hello from Bonn today. Unfortunately, I also cannot be in Geneva, which I would like to do. But other than that, yes, hello from my side. I just want to not to wrap up what Tom said, but he already said a lot of what we are doing, and I like to just come up with some general remarks on what is really the military or the air domain looking at when we're looking at AI. Because there are some particularities with the air domain, and one of them is of course speed. This is one of the main challenges, and I'll explain that later. Firstly, I would like to come up with some general comments as well, because conceptually, of course, we look at a better preparedness. We look to be ready for future operations. We of course want to look into new areas that we can analyze. We want to improve early detection or foresight. These are all applications, but they are not only due or valid for the air domain, but for the whole force. So for the air domain, what I already said, speed is one of the driving factors that we have to live with. Coming up with and Tom already mentioned it, decision superiority is based on information superiority and the superiority to act. And we all have to do that at one moment, actually, in one moment of time, because as soon as the air assets are launched, they cannot stop. They cannot wait like a ship on the sea or the forces on land if something is not developing. They need to act instantly, and they have to have the access to information at the right point and make the decision at the same point. So when we look at it, for example, at a pilot, and I always say with the system that Tom already described, having new unmanned assets wearing sensors or effectors, you enlarge a human being. You give him new senses, and you have to get in touch with these new senses. And the nerve system doesn't allow it at this point in the air, because the connectivity is not able to connect the raw data. Raw data, it's just too much information getting into one pilot, and so we need the artificial information to pre-select, to already decide what this one operator can see, because he cannot look at, for example, 17 different pictures at one time. This is overstressing it. We need something right at the front end, looking at what does the operator need to see? What is the really deciding fact in what I have found? And this with all the assets outside. And in the air, as you said, might be easier without obstacles, but on the other hand, it needs to work right from the beginning. Otherwise, we would not really exploit the technology what we have. So what we're looking at, Clausewitz already said it. The fog of war is what we really like to get rid of. And on the other hand, now you're really creating new fog with the information you have. You have so much information that you really have creating a new fog. What do you look? In former times, you didn't have any information at all. Today, you have all or too much information, and therefore we need AI to pre-select it and to come up to give the operator the right information size, the right portion of information in order to make the right decision at the right time. So that is what from my perspective is really relevant in the air domain, looking at the others. So that's one thing. And the other thing, and I like to already point at the second question, it of course will change all the fields that are that have to do with air forces. And I think everybody here in this virtual room knows for 20 years this .mil-PF, and I think AI will change everything of that. And we just don't know at this point of time what it will all be, because it's an iterative process. We will find out that some things change in operation-wise, that will, on the other hand, change things in the doctrine, that also have consequences in organization, material, and in the end in leadership and everything. So we are right at the beginning, but we know that we will probably influence all the domains and all the fields that I just pointed at. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks. And last but certainly not least, Bill.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to Joanna and to all of those who have been involved, firstly in setting this up, and secondly in getting me here. I've got a few comments to make. My first comment talks about the definition of a military aircraft. And this is an important factor because as an aircraft, you only get the right to exercise belligerent rights of attack, capture, etc., if you are a military aircraft. And the HPCR manual on the law of air and missile warfare defines military aircraft as any aircraft operated by the armed forces of a state, no problem, bearing military markings of that state, no problem, commanded by a member of the armed forces and controlled, manned, or pre-programmed by a crew subject to regular armed forces discipline. Well, command is stated in the manual to refer to the individual aboard the aircraft or controlling it remotely. So when you read that bit, you think, ooh, maybe we got a problem here with autonomous systems. But then part of the commentary to the rule comes to the rescue and says, for autonomously operating unmanned aircraft systems, They qualify as military aircraft if their programming has been executed by individuals subject to regular armed forces control. Does that really get us out of the problem in relation to a learning system where the programming doesn't necessarily control the lessons that the aircraft can learn? I just raise that and leave you to think about it. The Oslo Manual on Select Issues in connection with the law of armed conflict, which was published about, I think, 4 years ago, it distinguishes between highly automated systems, autonomous systems, and swarm systems. And I think the notion of automation must always be distinguished in our minds from the notion of autonomy. The two, in my view, are different. Autonomy is considered by that manual and its authors, and actually I wrote the first draft of this bit, as involving human-like reasoning to make evaluative decisions. Now, the others insisted on human-like being included in this. I think it's reasoning that is the key consideration there. But again, that's for you to consider. Certainly, the manual asserts that distinction, discrimination, proportionality, and precautions rules under the law of armed conflict apply to all of those three technologies. But the question then is it sufficient that the weapon system itself is capable of applying those rules of the law of targeting? Or is there a requirement in the law that a human being be actually applying those principles and rules? Certainly, all involved in the use of these technologies are recognized in the manual as being responsible for their respective roles in the use of the weapons system. So you have this notion of a disparate array of human beings being involved in operating these systems, and each of those human beings having responsibility for his or her actions apropos that weapon system. It's a role-specific notion. If the control of an autonomous weapon system is adversely affected by the enemy, and let's face it, cyber hacking is, it seems to me, in the future going to form a significant part of the conduct of future hostilities, then the question arises, where does responsibility for the subsequent activity using that weapon system lie? And I think if complete control is taken by the hacker, then clearly the hacker's state, and indeed the hacker, him or herself, takes on the responsibility to ensure that any attacks that are undertaken using such weapon systems are undertaken in compliance with targeting law. The hacker is responsible, certainly, when he or she knowingly or intentionally directs the weapon at a target, okay, of his or her choosing. The hacker is also responsible, it seems to me, if they cause the weapon to attack protected persons or objects, or to undertake indiscriminate attacks. But if you have a situation where the interference by the hacker has a lesser effect, say causing the weapon system to become merely less reliable, then the liability consequences, if you like, are not necessarily quite so easy to identify. But on the other hand, the use of cyber systems, for instance, to seek to erode the reliability of an autonomous weapons system is undoubtedly going to be characterized at law as a ruse under Article 37, Paragraph 2 of Protocol 1, and therefore it seems to me prima facie as being lawful. But the obligation to take precautions, and in particular the obligation to exercise constant care under Article 57, Paragraph 1, will, it seems to me, apply. If the hacker has control, then the attacker's precautions must be taken by that hacker, if indeed attacks are being undertaken. Artificial intelligence is something that we also need to consider, it seems to me, in the anti-air context. Mention has already been made of Iron Dome. Mention could also be made of Phalanx in this context. Whether you regard those as highly automated or autonomous is a matter for your own personal view. But the principle of distinction and the rules as to discrimination and proportionality apply there, but can be, it seems to me, satisfied by steps taken by those deploying those weapon systems, ensuring that the targets that the systems will engage are indeed lawful targets. If you're talking or thinking in terms of the use of artificial intelligence to facilitate anti-personnel attacks, then I think you need to think in terms, in practice, of two disparate channels, if you like, of technological advance coming together, namely biometrics on the one hand and artificial intelligence on the other. And there are question marks at the moment about the reliability of certain biometric systems, but on the other hand, again, one can foresee the possibility of that area of technology being developed further, and I am getting towards the end, I promise. One great facility that artificial intelligence might well offer in the future is the ability to observe autonomously what is going on in an area, in a location, and to have a much more informed view with a view to determining not just whether you're going to attack in that area, but actually what sort of military activity you're going to undertake. And that, I think, will be a plus. Certainly, it was actually these words I scribbled on my sheet of paper yesterday evening while I was watching the news, because there you had a report about the use of artificial intelligence to examine, after the event, images taken from outer space of certain areas of North America with a view to identifying whether balloons were being used over those areas. And I think that suggested to me that threat identification is a potential employment of artificial intelligence of potentially great utility. And indeed, it's an indication that transparency, in one of its forms at least, might well be a positive outcome from the development of artificial intelligence in the air domain. Speed has been mentioned, and I think speed is absolutely key. And it's key not just in the air domain, but it's also key in the maritime domain, where air and maritime join in the form of missile threats to maritime surface fleets and vessels in particular. What we have at the moment is a situation in which certain nations have developed or are in the process of developing missile technology capable of traveling at anything from Mach 9 through, and this will be the aspiration, Mach 20. Mach 20 is, to put it very mildly, with classic British understatement, rather rapid. The difficulty is in developing laser technology which has sufficient power to be able to engage inbound threats of that nature. And in practice, there are capability gaps there at the moment, as we speak. So I think any discussion that presupposes a necessary human link in the decision-making chain needs to, as the old English expression goes, get real. because frankly, I think it would be relatively soon fairly clear that it's the human link in that chain that is going to be the weakest link. Why? Because humans are remarkably bad at deciding at digital speed. And that, I think, is a major problem. Data fusion, we've heard referred to. I think when we're talking about the current decision-making process, when we're talking about human attack decision-making, for instance, we need to be realistic about how much that human decision-maker is actually exercising a realistic discretion, as opposed to how much that human decision-maker is merely pressing the button in reliance on pre-made aided decisions where the aid is at risk of taking over the decision-making process. Finally, I think we need to be prepared to talk about AI in all domains. I think AI applies not just in the air, land and sea domains, but also in cyber and also in connection with outer space. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Bill, and certainly all of our speakers for these great remarks. There's a lot of food for thought in there, and indeed this kind of cross-domain aspect is something that's come across through your points, and the good applicability of AI to the air domain in particular, the ease of applicability, and also thinking, I mean, there's so many points, I can't even highlight them all, but this force multiplier aspect and how many roles it shapes. But I also really like coming back to what you mentioned at the very beginning, Thomas, is, you know, not thinking of AI as a lump, but, you know, there's different aspects to AI, and you highlighted autonomy as one of them. And I think this is a nice segue to another question I've had, which are the anticipated impacts to the OODA loop, which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, which are some of the most discussed among experts. And I was wondering if you can expand a bit more on what changes you see emerging from the integration of AI within this loop specific to the air domain.
Very, very happy to do so, and thanks for the question, Sarah. Yeah, Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. I think it's basically just a description of how to turn an intention into action. And that's the procedural steps, how to get there. So for those not that familiar with it, maybe a short example. If I want to increase my knowledge together with Giacomo, I would basically enter this room and observe how many people are in here. Then I would orient myself by checking, okay, where is Giacomo sitting, and identifying him. So he's sitting behind the desk. Then I would have to decide, how do I basically link with him? Do I get there, shake his hand? Do I wave my hand? Whatever. So there's a certain course of action I could take to achieve my goal. So I need to decide for one, and I might decide just waving my hand at the current state. So that was basically then already the act. If I would have decided to walk there and shake the hand, I may have stumbled over the stairs, and I would have done corrective actions while going there. And last but not least, I would assess, have I been successful? If you may look back and basically greet back, and may approach me afterwards. So this is a simple explanation of Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. Now we want to accelerate this, and in a military domain, of course, it's much more complex to basically execute this. You can envisage already the Observe is quite immense, and Bill also mentioned on data, information gathering, how to really get all of the information together that you need for the appropriate decision maker and get the information from A to B. So there is, for example, AI involved in how can I take data from a sensor and get it actually to the appropriate user. How do I need to do the routing of this kind of information through the various means of communication? Do I use a laser terminal? Do I use an inter-vehicle data link? Do I use regular microphone? So basically all of this needs to be orchestrated, and all those routings need to be basically established. So AI is basically used in that context also to use those routings in this Observe, process, including then merging the information to for things that I can take. Yeah. Children are doing in a day-to-day basis, playing the various games, using those are the same algorithms that you could employ for this kind of decision making. Or decision so use this for the purpose that you have to the group, which I to use the possibility to decide in a timely manner, and that may when things happen. It may be even quite in advance to something happening that this decision needs to be taken, because in the course of there is no time to take that. I look, I decide, and then I go. So I think the positive thing of AI is giving us trust that the implementation is done properly, which is then going back to how do I getting validation data before we check with itself. Do I still my boundary conditions for which I have been engaged for, and especially in unmanned assets, this will apply. So if there is a large scale of automation or even a relevant autonomy, what is the boundary this kind of assets is quite key for that. And last but not least, the one part which is usually quite missed is the assess at the end. So it's the second A. Take has it really happened, and then start it from the beginning again to replan to see, okay, do I need to adjust some settings, my goal, and can finalize the mission and say mission accomplished. So those are a little bit says OODA is a historic topic. Far beyond another so far from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Turn to you, Jörg, for, as the user of such technologies, the implementer of them, about what changed so far. Anticipate any other changes to air warfare and air operations, and what sorts of impacts do you anticipate? And more specifically, I think here what's interesting to hear is, what are aspects of change that are known, and what are others that are difficult to anticipate, so are merely assumptions at this stage, given the, pace of technology and progression of technology?
All right, I think it's my turn. Sometimes you come in very broken, so the sound is not too good at this point. So I didn't understand everything, not what Tom said and not the complete questions, but I just want to add on what Tom said from a more technological way. We of course have to look from the operator's view. The decision, and I already pointed out that the operator will still be in a manned aircraft. So a completely autonomous or automatic air operation is not in our scope. So we have a one guy sitting very much in the front of such a formation, such a mission, and doing these operations. So I think of the unmanned assets connected to him with of course modern data connections, but of course with AI, because you need this as an operator to come up with the right decisions. Because in the early times, when you're flying a jet, you had to decide either when a threat comes up, what you're going to do. Are you going to avoid? Are you going to continue? Use certain maneuvers, or use the terrain? Nowadays, when we look at swarms, this whole swarm can react to actually this threat, and the unmanned components could do the dangerous things that man could or shouldn't be exposed to, and so the AI should optimize, of course, every time the formation changes without the decision of the operator, but present the operator what is being done. So it comes to explainable AI. The operator can follow on what's happening, and then can of course make some corrections and continue with the mission, and to follow on the aim of the mission. When it comes to making decisions at this point, of course you can define in the beginning what would be your target, but in the end you have to fuse all the information that you have at this point to come up with a decision that now is the right point of time or space to actually employ a weapon to engage, although of all planning. So this needs to be fused. This needs to be prepared to the operator, and to come up at this certain point in time with the speed of sound, so to have this sound operation. So that's from the operator's view in the air. And of course, it's not only one operator in the air. There are many operators in the air, so we have many formations, many missions going on, and the guys in the operations control central, they have to have a look what's happening there. But the main thing is we have to differentiate between micromanagement, autonomy, and really decision making. So AI for me is the tool to come up with the right decision and to avoid micromanaging or being cut off from what's happening in the space. So for me the essential in the air domain is how do I technically can manage the connection between the man and the machine in the air, especially in the air, and of course in the back where the big decisions are being made.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating to get that perspective. Liran, I now want to turn to you, and I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts on what you see as being the main challenges in implementing artificial intelligence in the air domain, and how you suggest these could be addressed effectively.
Thank you. So first of all, after this session today and the previous ones during the day, I just have to say, don't send microphones to the battlefield. They are not reliable at all, because most of the time we can't hear you. Now, in more serious note, when implementing artificial intelligence in the air domain, there are several key challenges. I think they're similar to other advanced technologies. I love to group them into 3 categories just to make it easy to remember. I'm calling them top challenges. T stands for technology, O stands for organization, and P stands for personnel. And please allow me to elaborate a little bit. So technology, this involves developing robust and reliable AI systems that can effectively analyze complex data, make accurate decisions, and adapt to dynamic situation in real time. Many of the speakers have spoke about it during the whole day till now. Overcoming technical challenges require advancement in machine learning algorithm, in data processing capabilities, sensor integration, and more. So we have many challenges under this headline of technology, that something like I can call maturity and reliability of technology, sometimes the high costs and sometimes addressed as unbearable costs of the technology, or the lack of flexibility within solutions that are proposed by the developers. So there are much more, but those are the most standing out. Organizational challenges in implementing the artificial intelligence in the air domain include cultural and change management, resources allocation, collaboration and coordination, data management and security, as well as governance and leadership. We're speaking a lot about policy and about responsible AI, those also things that coming under the organizational challenges, and of course things that related to ethical issues and legal issues that we have to handle with before using those AI systems. And P stands for personnel. When it comes to people themselves and technological changes, it seems that sometimes it's very difficult to do the change because of the people themselves and personal reasons. And this is also something that we have to address when we're bringing such an advanced technology such as AI systems to the air domain. Regarding addressing it effectively, I argue that in order to overcome setbacks we are having in that field, we need to adopt a more holistic approach and emphasize not only the tech, but also the soft factors in force build-up. And sometimes it's been forgotten, and I'm in a lot of relations with the people that working on those subjects, and sometimes they're speaking a lot about the technology, but kind of forgetting or putting aside something like, we will solve it later. No, sometimes you have to solve it even before you're bringing the technology. And there are various approaches to address these challenges, and I believe that many of the answers and the solution lie within the organization itself, among its people or partners, like the staff in the industry or academia or government. And so the key challenge is in this context is extracting the knowledge from the people or from the organization and transforming it into actionable plans or policy. Surprisingly, this can be done relatively easily and cost effectively using methodologies from the field of future studies. Having led several such studies, I can testify that they have positive results, and sometimes they're really surprising the policymakers or even the commanders, because they're saying, oh, the results were within us all the time. Furthermore, since certain issues do not necessarily have a high secrecy, there is a potential for collaboration between countries facing similar challenges. So it's a great opportunity for collaboration that can lead to better results. That's it.
Thank you so much. Those were really interesting remarks. Indeed, technology is not applied in a vacuum. So I really appreciated you bringing those non-technological aspects in, which also reflect what Jörg mentioned in his first points around, AI brings changes to doctrine, leadership, and much more. And having talked about these challenges, I want to make the most of having both Thomas and Jörg with us today to touch upon FCAS, which has been brought up a few times in this panel so far. And I think this is an excellent time to discuss this initiative further and ask concretely how this works, how the implementation of AI works in the air domain. And I'm particularly interested in learning from both of you how this collaboration between the user and the developer of the technology works. How does the user come up with a military requirement? How are these communicated? How are these transformed by the developer? And what are the main aspects of this relationship that ensure that it is successful and we avoid the challenges mentioned by Liran? So I don't know who wants to take first. I see you, Thomas, reaching for the microphone. So Jörg, you can go second.
Yeah, I just wanted to give the word to Jörg because he's the user and he's starting the process. So maybe if you start, Jörg, and then I will kick in how I try to technically solve the problems you put on my plate.
Yeah, that's actually the challenge that we have every day. And we're starting, it's the hen and the egg problem, actually. We come up with a problem. As I said, we want to be faster, we want to be more effective, we want to make good decisions. So I come up with this general idea, not knowing, of course, because I'm not a software specialist, on how to program it. So I come up with my with my request, with my requirements, and then the first step would be, okay, what does that mean technically? So I would go to Thomas and say, okay, we want to do this faster. How could we technically do this? At what point could we do this? And of course, then we have to together analyze what the whole process is, what we are talking about. The process needs to be defined, and then of course, and we're not that far yet. This process has to really come up with the first product, and then we have to see how does it work. And for me, it will be a lifelong iterative process with industry to develop it, to train the artificial intelligence. Does it really do what we want to do? I always look at it like, for example, training dogs or military dolphins. You have to do it every day because you have to have trust in what they do, and you have to have trust in what the AI is doing, and is it getting better in doing that, and can we really trust in it by using it? We're not that far, especially with the use of force employing AI. So I cannot completely finish on the process here, but this is the idea of how to come up with it, and especially when it is employed into really procured equipment. Of course, we have to improve it. We have to manage databases. We have to, for example, also look at more efficient ways of using it. So it will be a lifelong process, working on the AI and improving it in the means of how we can employ it. So, Tom, now it's you.
Thank you, Jörg, and really thanks for sketching that. From an engineering perspective, I mean, we are basically to standard adherent to value-based engineering and requirements-driven engineering process. In that context, I actually would also recommend an IEEE standard, which is called Value-Based Engineering Ethics by Design, which might be quite appropriate for this audience, to read over that, because it describes quite well how do you get from requirements over stakeholder management to a technical design result, and try to capture the needs on the way with the different exchanges that need to happen. And that's basically also what happens here. So we have basically a trinational customer organization, which basically gets together and elaborates together on what are our common requirements, what are our capability gaps, which was mentioned beforehand. So we have capability gaps in our military areas, which are basically evaluated and then put there to say, okay, if we want to reach that capability, if I want to fulfill this kind of mission, in that kind of threat landscape and in that kind of resources that I have, what might be potential solutions to this? So can you have a look at that from a technical perspective, how to solve that kind of given task? Then it's on us from technical side to pick that up, to say what are, in our FCAS parameter to speak, different layouts of airborne manned platforms, different layout of unmanned platforms. How can I combine them? What's the sizing of them? What's the magnitude of assets that I need? So how many of them to solve those given missions? And out of that, in an iterative loop, constantly checking in a first combination. That's how many fighters, together with so many unmanned, I employ on that mission. What's the success rate? What do I need to modify? More fighters, more unmanned, different capabilities on the fighter, different capabilities on the unmanned asset. How do I link them together? How can I get that stronger or looser in the tightening up to have impact on mission success? And this iterative approach is, of course, not something that I do on my own. That's a close interaction with the customers together, to basically providing them results and together checking on are we progressing in the same way. Which for me is the same thing that should apply for the AI implementation on that. So whatever we put on there as AI algorithms, and I sketched on that beforehand a little bit already, and I think also the colleagues from Air Force Research Lab in US have done quite some extensive work on this. How do we really involve ourselves, each other, not only an engineer doing a design, but also an operator and a user being involved in that design process, seeing what flaws are coming up while designing this kind of topics, getting familiar with it, so that out of that we can enrich ourselves through further maturing the result. Therefore, a lot of that is also related to testing at the end. So it's not only having a concept on the idea in the head on paper, it's really building it, testing it out, trying it, does it really work? Because there are a lot of other influential factors that you may not think of in the first place, but then together checking it will give us even more insights on how to quicker mature and quicker get the things done. So as we are talking about becoming quicker, it's not only about thinking about it, it's really becoming quicker from the initial idea, setting it into a safe environment and really trying it out to see if it works. And not only as a singular stakeholder in the game, really having all of your parties that are involved together at the table, discussing the result and seeing how further to mature it. And that's what we are trying to live basically in this.
Thank you so much, both. I had one last question for you, Bill, but I'm afraid we're out of time. So I propose we take this question to the coffee room for those who are in the room with regards to the legal aspect. And hopefully you can entertain at least the people who are here with us physically today with that question. But I want to thank all of our speakers for this panel, for their excellent interventions. And I invite you to take a short break, 10 minutes, I believe, till 3:10, and then we will resume with the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that was very fascinating. Good, good.
Likewise.
And you have, are you happy with the interest with
Yeah. Yes, all done. I didn't know what you meant about what you mean about over coffee.
That.
I think we can start. I invite you all in the room to take your seats. I think we are good to go, so that we can stay on track and respect the schedule. So good afternoon to all of you here in the room and to those following us online. I'm Jana Pushkash, I'm a researcher at UNIDIR, and it's truly my pleasure to moderate this panel, which will explore the impact of AI in 3 domains of warfare: space, cyber, and the cognitive domains. So these domains are relatively new compared to the traditional warfighting domains that the previously panels discussed, and in many ways they are greatly enabled by AI. For example, while disinformation campaigns have been a mainstay of warfare since ancient times, it is hard to imagine discussing about the emerging concept of cognitive warfare were it not for AI and advances in synthetic media. AI also has profound impacts on the cyber and space domains. For example, in the space domain, AI could be leveraged in multiple ways, including in communication links between space-based and ground-based assets. In the cyber domain, AI could be turbocharging methods to exploit vulnerabilities and to increase the speed and ease of access into critical systems. Though, of course, we should not overemphasize threats, but also benefits and opportunities for AI defense applications. So in this panel, we wish to have a balanced and realistic conversation about the role of AI in these new domains of warfare. Through a series of questions, we will aim to explore how AI is impacting these operational domains, what the risk landscape may look like, and further, how each of these domains is interacting with other domains of warfare. As you know, of course, modern conflict is indeed often fought on multiple domains simultaneously. So now, without further ado, let me introduce our speakers, and I will do so in alphabetical order. Our first speaker is Kaya Ziglish, who's a Senior Director of Digital Diplomacy with Microsoft and was previously previously worked with Microsoft's International Cyber Policy team. Wendy In is Principal Cloud Security Architect within the satellite communications sector at OneWeb. And finally, Oleg Shakirov is an expert with the Russian International Affairs Council, focusing on international cyber policy, arms control, and Russian foreign policy. And of course, just before we begin our discussion, I would like to remind all of you in the room and following us online to please use Slido for your questions. So let's dive right in. And I think this would be an appropriate sort of progression from the previous panel, which focused on air warfare. Let's discuss first outer space. And we will, so as I mentioned, for these three domains of warfare, we look first at how AI is in these domains. So I'm going to turn to Wendy first and ask her space as an operational domain.
Thank you for the questions. First, delighted to be here and to share with the community. From this, in the sort of from the point of the space domain, actually, AI, especially if you're sort of talking from sort of the automation point of view. So any of you who's actually flown, for example, there would have been some kind of automation. You know, the pilot sets the general course, but a lot of the flights are automated. Now, I work for an organization that uses low Earth orbit satellite to provide global internet connectivity for from space. The thing is, unlike sort of more traditional kind of satellite platforms where they're sort of stationary, the satellites actually move. And our constellation is 600 plus. You know, I probably shouldn't mention Starlink, but Starlink, you know, they have thousands. So you can't really, so that most of the operations side of that is actually automated. So we're already using it. We're sort of applying it. I think the sort of the crucial thing, I think, at the moment is, I think we're using the actual mathematical models and algorithms for that sort of the sort of the backbone of the of AI operations. They haven't had as much data input, so we're starting now to put more data and refining those models, so allowing them to sort of effectively provide more directed operations and allow them to operate in a manner which is more stable, I think. So from the space point of view, I just want to sort of put it out there that it's not so new.
Okay, thank you. Cognitive description of the concept exploits emotions, decision-making skills, and behavior. So, Kaya, how impacted this domain of warfare, and importantly, how is
Thank you. First of all, again, also thank you for having me. I think this has been a really interesting conference. It's always one of those things. I mean, there's good and bad, right, with all technologies. So I will try to not just be doom and gloom, but you know, I'm not sure I will succeed, but I'll try. So I'll start with the one thing that is a core, really positive aspect of AI has been it's really improved our threat intelligence as you know the industry, I think probably as a society. So you know for Microsoft itself, Microsoft with the use of AI tracks over 14 active nation state actors and 140 threat groups across different countries, both on cyber and on disinformation side. And the AI has really helped our security teams to effectively be able to identify these groups, to track them, to understand the different activities and different operations they're engaging in. So one thing that it's been really helpful for effectively is to understand what's going on, because I think a lot of times before we weren't entirely sure. It has allowed us to do more and understand more around technical attribution and make it stronger, as well as to insights into how techniques are evolving. I think we've seen, but again, both on disinfo and on the cyber side, we've seen technology be able to, so AI fighting AI effectively, being able to adapt quickly to the threats and sort of effectively prevent it from having the desired impact. I think you see this on the social media platforms, also outside the war context. You see that, and again, you see it on the cyber side. But to the broader point in terms of what challenges there are of course challenges. You mentioned at the beginning the synthetic media. Fakes effectively are the one that is the most discussed at the moment, I would probably say. The background, these are high fake images, fake audio content, fake videos that with AI. And in either an operation in sort of the operating theater of war or in peacetime in terms of the foreign influence operations campaigns, several effects. They can be very persuasive false negatives, right? I think a leader could be created in a fake image to deliver a fake message. The recipients would not necessarily know whether this is a fake video or a real video, and obviously, as in a conflict situation in particular, this can have dramatic impact in terms of could spread panic, could change the course of the war, could, a number of things. It increasingly creates, I'm not going to say plausible deniability, but kind of they argue it's plausible deniability, right? Because there are so many fake images, and a malicious actor or an actor could basically look at the real image and be like, oh no, but this wasn't me. I didn't do it. So ultimately trust in what we're seeing, undermining, and I think that this actually is an important challenge for the society more broadly. It challenges how we consume information, how much we trust, how we operate as as a society effectively, based on the information we consume and we receive. Sort of connects to the cyber operation that Oleg will be talking about a little bit more, is also of AI to voice, create images, create fake messages. And one of the things, like the phishing attacks became a lot more sophisticated because the English got better. The English got better because people use AI to translate the messages that people click on to, whether you go into a bank account or unveil the password or something like that. But increasingly, technology is being used to effectively use a Facebook page or a dating profile to replicate the voice, to sort of trick the individual to give personal information or confidential information. So I think that the link between the sort of cognitive disinformation, or whatever you want to call it, and the is another one that I would urge you to think about. To be honest, I think at this stage, there are several different, I think, paths that people are still researching. So definitely more in terms of research, but we really invested in something we call digital content provenance technology, effectively with the assumption that at some point that distinguish what's AI and what's real, because the fakes will get so good. Basically, create standards, create no, So it's there that the machines can always know that this is not real. And we work together, sort of not just us. I think for us at the beginning, this was like maybe a year and a half ago, is this technical, theoretical concept, but then also with the concept of authenticity, I hate this word, to actually create a standard, to create something that's more interoperable across different platforms in a much more multi-stakeholder environment. So bringing in others in the industry, bringing in others in civil society, to make it not just be a Microsoft initiative, a Microsoft thing, because it has to address broader societal problems. So I think that's sort of one solution, but I think we still have a long way to go.
Thanks, Gael. We'll get actually in a bit to discuss a bit on risk mitigation, but I think it was very interesting the way sort of domain of for example, deep fakes that were absolutely intentionally created with a political purpose in mind are denied. They want it's very interesting to understand how this domain is being weaponized and manipulated. But as a follow up, because you portrayed you gave us a bit of an understanding of what's happening now. Should we be worried about to fight cognitive warfare? Is there some constant trends on the horizon?
So I would say, I think AI has obviously been around for a while. I think the recent sort of 6 months or so, we've seen generative AI deliver on some promises very early. And so I think what we're seeing is the technology just getting a lot better over time. Again, for both good and for bad. And I think so what I would expect there, in particularly in this area, is to actually get worse before it gets better. And I think see a lot more sophisticated. We've seen images, and now I think we're probably moving to like there will be real-time images or videos that are fake. I mean, maybe at the beginning there would be effectively a puppeteer in the background telling them, like what they do, but eventually independently operated by AI. So I think that's kind of the path and the trend, and I think like I said, it'll get worse before it gets better, but hopefully it'll get better too.
Thank you. So, discussing in this panel, which is cyber, to help us understand what AI and what exactly does AI bring in this domain. Share a few thoughts on both offensive and defensive cyber capabilities.
Thank you. I think I will pick from where Kyle left off. So, of course, the most obvious of ChatGPT has been the generation of content, and has been ChatGPT and similar services to generate phishing emails, digital identity. So that's of course plausible. I think that ChatGPT about the service. Of course, it's not. It's inaccurate, but sometimes accuracy is not the main goal. To generate some basic summary of what the organization does, and if you combine this. Generate a lot of personalized and very targeted content. But of course, that's not all. There are many experiments with how ChatGPT and similar services can be used to generate and one of the services to create code that can evade. An interesting example. Keylogger that essentially code for the same function every time, and it does so without connecting structure, right? So basically, different every time. Surface. See that, of course, this tremendously increases the speed of attacks. So if you previously need to spend a lot of structure like phishing emails, here's it's also less costly. It can be less costly. The threshold for entry can be lower. Of course, it's not talking about warfare. This is more about cybercrime. Also, this complicates because this detection more difficult. This complicates attribution, and another kind of interesting example is autonomous more, so they can persons in chats that will look authentic. There are some studies that look at what stages of cyber where AI are detected. Researched case studies was at the access and penetration stage. So it's kind of cyber attack. And this tells us something about how this is affecting the whole field. So some of the easy succeeding system will be able to invite like real specialists to continue. Nation state tests. Also gives some new benefits if you can make your design it in such a way that it will be able to perform more tests once it transfers. There is a lot of discussion, especially in the military domain, that you don't that you want to integrate cyber with special nation states and powerful nation states. They will be to use AI So, briefly, of course, a lot of goes back and forth between offense and defense. So why AI to detect phishing emails, bots to detect malware and stuff like that. And this is cycle because smart bots also, they will be allowed because these different pieces of code, they basically specific IOCs and indicators of compromise. You need to look for similarities. So maybe something more advanced, but I think that some people are already experimenting with it. Speaking about kind of national level, in many states, the problem is that many smaller organizations they don't have any sophisticated tools, and I see a lot of promise thanks to expressions. Come handy that they need to analyze. So we see this security incident and event management systems. They are like alerts, not false positives. But this will be even more important for nation states because right now most nation states, even the most powerful nation states, they don't have quite awareness of what's happening in cyberspace, and we see this require companies to report incidents, to share some data. But once the government has a lot of AI would be finally the widespread of use of AI also increases the attack surface. So previously we did not have any systems that were possible to attack, but now kind of chat, and so you would need to protect it from all kinds of attacks. Also, some examples of this with the existing services, but AI kind of not easy prey, but it would be something that the hackers would go after. So it's important to take this into account when we build these systems. And I think it's fair to say that some of the systems are not tested for like robustness and safety. And
Thank you. Like that was really interesting and a very comprehensive answer indeed. Actually, I have what does the domains that you're discussing, each of you, so space, cyber and cognitive, and AI, is fought in, in multiple domains simultaneously. So it's great to speak only about that cyber operations, space-based sort of. So with this in mind, I know that you each sort of portrayed a bit what is happening, discussing more. Let's look at the in the space, in the cognitive or in the cyber domain, interacts with other domains. So from all these complex interactions between different domains, can you share your thoughts on this? How they interact with other domains?
So I think just to follow on, I think one thing I hope I alluded to is AI's, the actual sort of basis of it's been around for a while. It's in more recent times that we've been able to sort of amplify it. So, you know, whether it's the cognitive domain or the cybersecurity domain, it's the ability of AI to amplify whatever you're doing and also amplify at speed, which is what we've seen, and amplify consistently. So, part of the reason why, you know, a lot of satellite operations automated is because it just makes the thing, the process much more consistent across the board. I think in terms of there's a panel guidance, AI, so we're going to use it, like people are going to use it. You know, if you're in whichever domain, you know, there's good things. So, for example, in AI, in space, you can satellite operations already heavily rely on automation and AI. You can find additional information from kind of how a spacecraft operates in the atmosphere. Potentially, what kind of like health information about the craft that can sort of you can leverage into future missions. Of course, you know, you have the bad side of it, but I think we are in a position where the technology exists and we don't. So you don't want to be, you know, oh, this is bad, we're not going to use it. I think you just need to sort of try and have a considered approach. Precisely the reason why we have conferences like this to discuss how we can best use it to sort of fund society as opposed to sort of in a more detrimental manner.
And yes, I would probably agree. And I think building on that, yes, people will use it. And on some of the things that Oleg said as well, at the end, I think as people will use it, I think it's really, really important that we collectively also make sure that exactly what he was saying, the surface, which is systems and models. And so becomes more of a feature of everyday life, but also obviously warfare. I think it's important to ensure that these don't in terms of maybe adopting a norm on not on state actors not interfering with the systems themselves. Maybe it you know, maybe not maybe for sure the industry has to be strengthening the security of the. I think, you know, for cybersecurity, software development life cycles, on security by design, making sure that some of these lessons are get integrated into AI and are not forgotten as cyber is a different domain. Incorporated be really important. But there obviously are also new risks. The and I think we've seen attempts to effectively reverse the model, try to the data. We've seen in experiments attempts to effectively change the manipulate the data that's used to train the model. I think the training data is really important as well to, in a way that's not visible to humans, but so that the model, for example, would see the stop sign on the street, but not recognize it as a stop sign, but recognize it as a go sign, right? It with potentially dramatic impacts on if you're thinking this is driving in a car, right? So thinking about across the domains, if the AI is a feature, whether it's or in other aspects, working on protecting the models and the algorithms and strengthening them, I think would be really, really important. I have other things, but I'm gonna.
Thank you. Yeah. Devices. And, supply chain, so there will be multiple like elements, including like data from different sources, to disentangle it, and this will create a lot of opportunity to interfere with it. And big believer in diplomacy, but right now is not. Doesn't seem like it's time for diplomacy. So I would like to focus to be more kind of transparent. So if you discover some vulnerability of how one system can be exploited, maybe in civilian sector, you can publish it and translate it into with the kind of transparency can potentially help everyone become safer. That's at least what I hope for.
Sorry, Oleg touched on a sort of much adored subject, supply chain. So in satellite communications, the supply chain is extensive, and every part of the operations aspect of it, whether it's the satellites, whether it's the ground network, whether it's user terminals, all software operated by applications and software. About 75 to 80% of code lines in applications are open source. And these are libraries that's shared amongst the community. So if you're looking for vulnerabilities, I think, looking at the open source, it sort of diving in, that open source component is going to be critically important. And that, I think, if you look at the recent sort of the likes of Heartbleed, Log4Shell, MoveIt, they're all from open source. So it's sort of managing that supply chain, making sure that that part is as secure as possible. So from the space sector, I think that's one way that you can, from the defense side of it, and of course for offense, that's an aspect that you can sort of leverage.
Thank you all very much. This is actually a perfect segue that you these are sort of risks and they're applicable to all three domains and concerns across the three domains. But when we talk about mitigation, what sort of steps you consider most appropriate? What can of course it must be perhaps a combination of this, but how exactly would you frame this notion of response in space, cognitive, and cyber? Sorry, I'm looking the microphone,
Okay, I'll start with the mic. So from the space side of it, in terms of risk mitigation, it is sort of looking at your supply chain. You know, are your supply chain in terms of checking, you know, who they work with, whom they're working with? Are your products transported? Is that in a sort of secure facility? Who has access to it during the software development lifecycle and everything? I think, you know, I think all of our sort of topics here comes down to software. Everything's software development and lifecycle. How you know, what is the due diligence? What process? What checks do you have? What scans are you conducting? And actually, in terms of they're actually very sophisticated products for defense. Um, so just making sure that your sort of processes, your supply chain, well, do your due diligence on those. And finally, I think, you know, we talk about a lot about AI, but if you look at, sorry, my space sector, but in cybersecurity, if you look at the sort of most instances, the second application vulnerabilities on application, the biggest effect is still human directed. It's like, you know, whether it's through phishing, somebody, you know, pressing something, acting on something that they shouldn't. So I think discuss AI, but actually the human is still quite an important part of the chain.
And I feel like we'll all agree probably, but like so I think one other thing I would add is, you know, I'm not as pessimistic about the cyber aspects to it as I'm on maybe about the cognitive ones, and particularly because sophisticated, they use a lot of computing power. I do think that our get progressively better and better and better, and because not all use it for, I think ultimately AI will help defense more than offense. So I feel that there is like a glimmer of hope. But I think it's very important to what the organization has bought, effectively is the supply chain, how secure the different elements are. It's important to work with your suppliers, the tech companies and others. Again, it- uh, uh, to ensure these are secure is important. And then, you know, on the human element, obviously super important in terms of the cyber, but also incredibly obviously important in terms of the cognitive part. So I think bringing like journalists, media, bringing in media literacy experts, and increasing the societal awareness around effectively how to like effective digital literacy, but also just literacy, consume information, which, you know, neither tech experts nor governments often are experts in, but you do need to bring in educators, psychologists, journalists to do fact checking, and so it needs to be a broad societal approach going forward.
Thank you. I would like also to endorse the idea of but still in many of them it's possible to start. What co-panelists already said is that there needs to be more there needs to be some transparency, more data sharing. So, for example, if you talk about side of preventing of using AI to attacks. One of the problems is that every and, these some areas. So, for example, sharing this and commercially or even it's really advanced models without this data, especially some companies for major states get small others can provide them. And so I think there needs to be, to some extent, I know it's kind of commercial stuff like that, but I think some data sharing would be important, at least in the cyber domain. Because if you look at how these most popular for free, so you don't have cyber. So this will be really crucial.
Sorry, I just borrowed the mic. So I think the data aspect of it is very important. So I've through my journeys, I've worked in different industries. And if you look at, if we talk about the sort of cyber aspect of it, the most sophisticated sector is probably financial services. Now, for financial services, they do have some kind of framework to share data. And I think, if we want to sort of progress forward as a community, and from sort of defense side of it, I think sharing that data is crucial. Now, a lot of all of these mathematical models, they rely on data. They rely on the data for tuning. They rely on data, to sort of make sure that you get rid of false positives, etc. I think one thing that potentially, sorry, this is cyber again, going back to cyber, that is sort of so different. Why attackers maybe potentially have, there are a number of reasons. They're fantastically brilliant at sharing data. Once the data's out there, everybody have hands on it. And they're not very they don't really say, oh, we're with this company, with that company. They don't care. So if we can sort of, from the defense side of it, if we can adopt that kind of mindset, I think that would really help us going forward.
Thank you so much. So moving on to the questions that we got from it's more for Oleg, I suppose. But then from that, I want to extrapolate to ask all of you. So Oleg, the question is also for Kaya, perhaps. So how does generative defense balance in the cyber realm, and does it shift it in any way? So
I think as it appeared now, as it became with all this impressive growth rate of ChatGPT user base, I think initially it was benefited because it was the defense is catching up. So Kaya to detect the of content, and there are other companies that are doing this. So this is response to threat. But already companies that want to defend information, they already kind of trying to figure out the way to do it. But also there are multiple examples of how defenders are using ChatGPT or other services as a second pilot, for example, or to probe different hypotheses, etc. So I think benefited the defense more, but now I think it's moving. The balance is kind of gradually being restored. But that's going back to this metaphor. Tourism. so true about arms race. So it's always always going back and forth.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think, as said earlier, I think I'm a bit more optimistic around the cyber than the cognitive space, at least in the midterm. You know, all of the companies, but like Google has a product out, we have a product out that allows the defenders to use AI and to effectively empower them to do more security. Really, across the world, we're facing a cybersecurity skill shortage. And to simplify the allow in particular in terms of I'm going to say low hanging fruit, right? The human error, the attacks that explore the lack of basic cybersecurity hygiene, the not you'll have to have a sophisticated understanding to find, although again AI can help, to find a sophisticated actor hiding in your networks. But I think the simple sort of mass attacks, I think AI help. So that's, I think, good.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to address. For example, right now, chatbots, they use basically you can try your code and you say like, is it secure? Do you see any vulnerabilities? And if it's some common vulnerability, advanced systems, cybersecurity, a lot of kind of progress driven by the automated routine tasks. It's configured so you can use systems that would root out most common mistakes, etc. And we see and supplement existing professionals with some tools that can perform basic functions that would go.
Wonderful, thank you. So just before panels today, and which is this idea of being a bit also incredibly new, transformative ways of changing warfare. I think just are there ways in these three domains are we perhaps overstating the impact of AI, or in other words, can we cause the amount of damage in these fields without AI as well? So, or is it really something? Is really the impact of AI system something that threat across the systems, or perhaps we should have a more balanced idea of threats, or to what extent AI is more just teasers?
So you know, AI we've been using those for decades. I came from medical genetics background, and about 20 years ago, we were using that to sort of look at data analysis and sort of find patterns. So that is not new at all. I'm a bit of a technologist, so I quite like progress and, you know, what we can do. So, you know, potentially I'm not sort of like, I'm slightly less cautious. But I think, you know, in terms of concerns about it, from the point of view of the of warfare, we have the same tools our attackers or, you know, attackers do. So we're actually on a sort of level playing field. I think as part of this conference, but I think we you know we shouldn't be too concerned about it, because ultimately, if you look at it, we're still, you know, who actually make the decisions is still a human. They're not capable of making those type of decisions just yet. And I just think I think the benefits from AI and we're not talking about just space or cybersecurity. You're talking about healthcare, image analysis, like cancer diagnosis, which is a so much potential of just improving everybody's lives, and we should sort of like not.
I mean, I would completely agree. I think in terms, you know, I think that there needs to be oversight. I think there needs to be, you know, whether it's regulation, whether it's guiding ethical principles, I think all of these things definitely need to be there. I think there also needs to be the traditional risk management approach that we had to other areas needs to be applied to this area. I think it's not just because it's new, we need to, let's just ignore the risk. There are risks. But it's a force for good across many domains, right? Like you said, healthcare, innovate. So humans are flawed, and we use it. So I think that's kind of a little bit the problem.
Yeah, I think that from my perspective in this cyber security industry, there is, of course, there is some hype about AI. It's about more sophisticated tools, and it can be very simple. For example, there are some major companies previously so that they can figure out whether to kind of assign them some course, etc. So this illustrates how different new opportunities. See that there is still a kind of human, of course, some place anyone.
Thank you. I would just ask each of you. Collective options and frameworks for governing AI. And as thoughts very broadly on how states and the international community can advance options for governance. And really, I would like to because of course we speak about supply chain and efforts that can be done at the industry level, at the organization level, but more
well, but to be honest, it's getting more and more complicated. So I would just state what I said before. I think that there should be more transparency in the industry and from governments. They should understand that we have this kind of diplomacy gap, and they should try to uh, and knowledge that they generate, and they should seek out information from other participants and try to not only learn from their own mistakes, but from everyone else's mistakes and knowledge.
And I would agree. I would say, I would encourage everybody to engage in multi-stakeholder discussions, not just multilateral, which would be good. Interfering with the algorithms. Another one, less known, most civilian using the content provenance technology to make sure that we as a society know what's happening. And industry and governments would on the greater research in sort of where and how it spreads. I think we're still kind of quite early in that journey.
Thank you. So I think what type of policies in place?
So, good afternoon. And could I please ask everyone to take your seats? We're now proceeding with the concluding panel of what has been a day of rich discussions already, and we'll add to that a little more. The panel that we're now about to open is entitled A Regular Institutional Dialogue for Artificial Intelligence in the Military Domain, and we've put a question mark. Here's what we're really after with this panel. I think throughout the day you've heard how intelligence is now embedded in so many different military domains, how it affects so many different military capabilities, and of course that begs the question how to proceed, how to keep pace with the technological evolution, also what collective steps we could take next. Now, one idea that's been around is to establish some sort of a mechanism for a more regular institutional dialogue. And what we will be discussing on this panel is whether that is a good idea, what form and shape such a dialogue could possibly take, and also what alternatives possibly exist. Now, I'm truly honored that so many distinguished speakers have accepted the invitation to this concluding panel, and I'll just do a very brief round of introductions before we dive right in with the first question. So we're joined by the UN High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Her Excellency Izumi Nakamitsu, who's joining us virtually today from New York. I'm also delighted to say that we're joined by His Excellency Omar bin Sultan Al Olama, the Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, Digital Economy, and Remote Work Applications with the Government of the United Arab Emirates. With me on the stage, I'm delighted to say, is Her Excellency Mallory Stewart, Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Arms Control, Verification and Compliance with the US State Department. And then we have two further panelists joining us virtually, His Excellency Marcel de Vink, Vice Minister for Political Affairs with the Government of the Netherlands, and His Excellency Hyun Woo Cho, Ambassador for International Security Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs from the Republic of Korea. And I would like to kick us off with a scene-setting general question that I want to pose to all of our panelists today. And I would ask for rapid-fire, fairly short reactions, please. I have quite a few questions to ask our panelists, so this is just the first. And if you could please keep it to 2 minutes in your answer. And if Izumi Nakamitsu could please kick us off answering the question, and here it comes. How important do you think it is that states collectively initiate and pursue discussion on the responsible integration of artificial intelligence in military capabilities in the military domain, including but not limited to weapon systems? Izumi, over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin and UNIDIR for inviting me to this panel. Just to very simply answering your question, why it is important, it's simply because AI would transform all aspects of military affairs, from logistics, early warning for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, everything, targeting, attack, command and control, communication systems, etc., etc. So when we know that is going to happen, simply we should not be blindly following where technology will take us. Rather, it is important to recognize that we, the humans, have the agencies to determine when and how AI and machine learning should be used. So that's as simple as that. Just to look at those, there are, of course, positive end of the spectrum, how AI will contribute to good in the military domain. I could come up with all sorts of examples, enhancing nuclear verification, identifying cyber threats, or recovering systems and networks from cyber attacks. But there are areas where, there is less clear or contested impact. For example, highly debated area, integration of AI in early warning systems. There are people who would say this will be a positive thing, but also there is a camp of experts who would say that this logic, arguing that AI-enabled intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capabilities could be a source of escalation and be used for targeting and attack purposes in times of conflict. So there is definitely, contested areas. And of course, at the end, AI should do what humans expect it to do, and should do so with a clear explanation of its decisions. The so-called black box effect. Those decisions should be also traceable. It should not be going into a black box either. Of course, AI in weapons-related functions, such as pre-denegation to launch weapons, that's the use of force decisions, especially nuclear weapon systems, is an extremely dangerous concept that could result in potentially catastrophic humanitarian consequences. So the only way, is for us to deepen our discussions and make sure that we would determine how AI should be used rather than technologies would determine how that would be used. So it's, this is why it is critical for the future of our military domains.
Thank you very much, Izumi. And can I please pass the question now to Minister bin Sultan Al Olama? Collective dialogue, collective discussion to be initiated by states. Over to you, Minister, please.
Thank you very much, Robin. It's an absolute pleasure being with all of you today. And I cannot help but echo Her Excellency Nakamitsu's comments. I think that AI is going to completely transform the military as we know it and military operations. That is because of certain things. First, I think incorporating cutting-edge technologies in militaries is inevitable, and AI is not an exception. We've seen that throughout history. We also know that AI is going to change a lot of the operations of militaries just because of the vast amount of data that military operations require for militaries to do their jobs. Understanding all the data, crunching it and taking decisions is something that militaries around the world will try to use to become more efficient and more capable. We're going to also see a lot of use of AI with regards to efficient resource utilization within militaries, especially the larger militaries, because at the end of the day, if you can spend this extra dollar or extra pound or extra dirham in something that ensures that you are better guarded and safer, I'm sure that most militaries would opt for that option. But there are some major concerns, one of which is the ethical and moral concerns, as we've heard in the prior comment, as well as accountability issues. So how do we ensure that we know who's accountable? And we also are able to ensure that militaries around the world try to work within an agreed set of parameters that are agreed upon by all other countries that they consider their peers. I think this is going to be a very delicate balance. We need to constantly push for this. It's not going to be easy, but our job is to ensure that we have at least a set of guardrails that governments around the world would operate using and operate with.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I think both speakers have really confirmed what we heard repeatedly also throughout the day today, the broad range of applications that AI really as a tool for process optimization is going to bring about. I'll now turn to Mallory Stewart. We're sharing the microphone, so over to you, please.
Thank you so much. Completely agree with what the two panelists said before. First, let me thank you, Robin and UNIDIR, for inviting me. Very happy to be here. And what is said has been said over the course of the entire day with the importance of AI to military applications, but to broad governmental and non-governmental work generally. And it's not a question of if this usage will expand, but it's a question of how. Will we utilize it in a responsible manner to maximize its advantages, or will we not take the opportunity right now to encourage international conversation, to encourage broader understandings of uses and capabilities to test and keep those uses in a responsible manner, and potentially allow it to be used recklessly, or allow its use to become more negative and harmful and risk-inducing rather than risk-preventing and risk-mitigating. So completely agree with the two previous speakers. I expect everyone here today appreciates the conversations we've had and agrees that there's a need for them to clarify the numerous sort of inconsistencies between understandings, the numerous different definitions that we've heard today, whether it's for greater transparency in the use of AI, or even sometimes less transparency. There's been sort of various comments, but one of the reasons that the US, through Undersecretary Jenkins' comments in February at the REAIM conference hosted by the Dutch, said we're at an inflection point with the use of AI in the military context, is because we see the need to try to define and understand where responsible uses lie, to prevent its use from increasing risks and really help it maximize the benefits going forward. So, the idea at the REAIM conference that the US proposed was we start a conversation on where that responsible behavior lies, and where there can be an international consensus on the use of AI in the military context in a responsible way. So we're hoping to sort of continue that conversation. We look forward to additional questions on this panel and further conversations.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the warm-up round, so thank you all for keeping first round of answers short and crisp. And I very much agree, of course, that we are at an inflection point when it comes to military uses of AI, and I think that's part of the reason why we all gathered here today. Marcel de Wink, I would like to turn it over to you now. The floor is yours. Not sure you heard me, but Marcel de Wink, please, over to you. Okay. And shall we move on, or are you sending a message? You see.
Many thanks, Robin, and glad to be part of this panel. I think the other panelists have covered already a lot of ground, but to your question, do states have a role to play here? Do we need to discuss this? Absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
Laat maar gewoon door, want hij is in vertraging. Hoor ik hiervan.
Right. The connection is very bad, so I'll just continue my answer. Hopefully, yeah.
We hear you loud and clear. Please continue.
I think other panelists have covered already a lot of ground, so just let me make a couple of points. One is, we have no choice than to deal with this challenge and make sure that we discuss this. Others have pointed out that there are many challenges, but we should not forget that there are also advantages in and that the military will benefit from the use of AI. But there are also real concerns on transparency, predictability, accountability, and others. So this actually is about a whole range of issues that need to be discussed. And as you are aware, Robin, we organized in the Netherlands in February the first we organized a first conference on the use of AI in the military domain, and I think that has encouraged us to continue that debate, not just among states, because I think that's a crucial part of what we're doing, but also with industry, academia, NGOs, and we have no time to lose. If you look at the development of ChatGPT and what this is being, how this discussion is taking place in our societies, then I think you can imagine how quickly this technology is also being proliferated by the military and the use of the military. And what we see now is that many countries would like to stay ahead of the game, given the uncertainty of what's happening right now, and preserve their technological edge. So again, there's no time to lose, but we need to take this discussion further, and we're very pleased that Korea has taken up the important task for organizing a sector conference in 2024.
Marcel, thank you very much, and I apologize for the audio issues. There seems to be a bit of a bug in the system here today. I mean, the Secretary General also said technology is not moving incrementally, and the time to act is really now. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the ambassador from the Republic of Korea, please. The floor is yours. You're still muted, sir.
You can hear me, right? Yeah. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to speak on behalf of the Republic of Korea. And then I concur, first of all, I concur with all three speakers' statements. This question is, I think, deeply linked to the very nature of AI technology. AI is an incredibly efficient technology. Many believe that AI will be a game changer in the military domain. AI-enhanced data processing analysis has already shown its usefulness in areas such as intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. It seems almost impossible to prevent the military application of such technology, as it is already happening. At the same time, AI is an imperfect and evolving technology with significant uncertainties. We do not have a full understanding of the risk associated with the AI. For example, humans has yet to fully understand the results generated by the AI based on deep learning. Machine learning, which relies on existing data, can produce inaccurate results when encountering new environments or contaminated data. In some cases, AI may produce wrong results, such as hallucinations. Likewise, my government fully concurs with the need for a discussion on the responsible integration of an AI military system. In this regard, I'd like to highlight three aspects. First is the pace of this discussion. Looking at the pace of the technology of advancement, we need to act fast. We need to move with a sense of urgency and start discussion only to mitigate those potential risks arising from AI. Second is the scope of discussion. We have a dedicated discussion on lethal autonomous weapon system, which is a loss, but the integration of AI in the military system goes well beyond that discussion of the laws. We believe that much comprehensive dialogue would need to take place. Third is the scope of participation. The discussion should not be limited to the states considering the adoption of AI for military use. All states need to understand the potential risk and benefits associated with an unprincipled approach to AI. In this regard, the REAIM Summit this year, held in February, initiated by the Netherlands and co-hosted by Korea, took a step in the right direction. As the host of the next REAIM Summit, we will try our best to build on to the first successful summit, and we look forward to closely working with the international community, including government, industry, civil society, and academia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And after this first round of scene-setting question and answers, I would now like to turn to some more specific questions to each of the panelists. And my first question is to the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Izumi. I mean, as you know best, for the good part of the last decade, states have engaged in substantive discussions on lethal autonomous weapon systems under the framework of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. So here's my question. What options exist to initiate a structured multilateral dialogue that builds on and adds to such a process, but without duplicating or competing with it? Over to you.
Well, thank you for that question. It's a very, very important issue, as you can imagine. First thing is that I would like to actually say that CCW, Convention on Certain Conventional Weapon, that mechanism itself really continues to be a very important one. It's multilateral, it's inclusive forum in which states can engage in substantive discussions on lethal autonomous weapon systems. It's been very, very useful. You know, in the high contracting parties to the convention at the annual meeting in November 2023 may wish to renew the mandate for the group of governmental experts on laws to ensure that continuation of the discussions there. Now, we don't know, it's unclear at the moment. The reason why we think it's an important mechanism is that CCW is a flexible instrument under which the high contracting parties reaffirm the need to continue the codification and progressive development of the rules of international law applicable in armed conflict. And they do so, as you know, through the elaboration and adoption of protocols that prohibit or regulate certain types of weapons that may not be excessively harmful and also have indiscriminate effects. So it's at its core, it's a humanitarian framework convention. Now, under the, I think, Article 8 of the convention, high contracting parties may propose additional protocols relating to other categories of conventional weapons not covered by the existing protocols, and may convene a conference to agree on any new protocols, including lethal autonomous weapon systems. So we will see what will happen in November there. Now, there are also other fora within the UN system where this issue could be discussed, namely the First Committee of the General Assembly. And we hear that some member states actually are looking into this option as well. Member states could, in addition to the GGE laws, or building upon the substantive progress made at the GGE so far, adopt a resolution there in the First Committee on the topic of laws to further explore the issue on the basis of the progress so far, or to decide on a pathway towards agreeing on prohibitions and regulations of laws. Now, I would like to actually mention that there are some voices to take the issue of laws out of the United Nations framework altogether. And this is driven basically because of the need to have urgent actions, and then those UN processes actually do take longer time. But I do not believe that this will be an appropriate or effective way of making a progress in the multilateral settings. I think the UN is a truly universal forum for discussion amongst all states, including the major military powers. And I think it is important to have the major military powers fully engaged in these discussions. UN, we believe, is ideally placed to enable inclusive and universal agreements that may be accepted and implemented by all in the future. And then we need that very quickly. The process outside of the UN framework will risk losing the participation of the key states, and we don't think it will be very effective. Now, I would like to definitely stress the urgency, however, for action to be taken by states. And you know already our position. The Secretary General has been voicing his views very forcefully, prohibit lethal autonomous weapon systems with the capacity to take lives without human involvement, and those that cannot be used in accordance with the IHL, the International Humanitarian Principles. So I would like to echo that call, definitely. It's been some time that member states have been spending, so now is the time for action.
Sumi, thank you very much for this comprehensive lay of the land in terms of the options that states could pursue. Minister Alolama, my next question goes to you. The UAE was the first country to formally appoint a minister for artificial intelligence, and I think that was back in 2017. So, from your own experience, how have you seen the AI ecosystem change since you took office, and what have been your main challenges as Minister of Artificial Intelligence? Over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Honestly, I feel relieved now that artificial intelligence has become such an important topic around the world. It was a challenge in the beginning, trying to emphasize the importance and trying to make governments know that this is something that is a big deal that we need to deal with in the coming years. The UAE has gone through a transformation. We went from being a country where we were technology adopters to being technology creators. The UAE right now, I'll give you a few examples, has some world-leading AI systems that are bred and born in the UAE. A simple example, so there's an institution called the Technology Innovation Institute in the UAE in Abu Dhabi that has a team led by a female called Dr. Absam Al-Mazroui, who's an Emirati woman. And they've created a large language model called Falcon LLM, which is currently considered the best open sourced LLM in the world on Hugging Face. This is a testimony to the maturity of the ecosystem and as well what the UAE is capable of creating internally. That was only possible through great emphasis on investments and the efforts that the government has done over the past couple of years to adopt and lead in this field. What we've done just quite quickly is we've actually worked on integrating artificial intelligence within education. So we've had a AI integration within the school curriculum. So children from very early on learn how to code, and then they move into understanding how to build blockchain systems and artificial intelligence systems as well. We've launched the first AI-focused higher education institution in the world called the Mohammed bin Zayed University for Artificial Intelligence, which graduated its first cohort earlier this year. And it's a completely AI-focused university, and it focuses specifically on applied artificial intelligence. And then finally, we realized that there are a lot of issues relating to ignorance in the decision-making process. So government leaders, if they are ignorant on the impacts of artificial intelligence, will take certain decisions that might lead to harm future generations or harm other countries without them really wanting to cause that harm. So we launched a program with the University of Oxford to train every senior member of the technical skill set within government on artificial intelligence, and for them to actually graduate, they need to go through actually trying to answer the moral questions, ethical questions, understand how do you look at AI code and understand it, understand as well what are responsible deployments of technology and irresponsible deployments as well. We've done a lot in laws and regulations. So we've launched the government data law in the UAE. We've also launched a AI procurement guideline to ensure that government officials are not able to procure AI in unethical states or also use AI systems that are black box in nature. We've also launched a generative AI policy for where do you or where can you actually deploy generative AI systems? How can you use them? What's the best and the most effective way for you to do that? And today, the UAE has become the epicenter of data centers in the Middle East. So we have a lot of data centers, whether it's hyperscalers or large data centers that serve the broader region within the UAE. We've also, if we're going to talk about computing capabilities, the UAE has one of the fastest and most powerful supercomputers in the world that is owned by Group 42, which is a UAE domiciled company. And there are so many examples of AI-first companies that are exported from the UAE and they are serving global clientele. All of this happened because of the foresight, as well the belief that AI is an important technology and need to work on being creators of the technology rather than just importers, as we have been in the past.
Thank you so much for sharing these insights. And I think the academic collaboration, international collaboration, the scientific collaboration that you mentioned, they also deserve a lot more attention still in our multilateral discussions at the multilateral level. Mallory, I'll turn it to you now. And my question to you is, of course, during the REAIM summit in the Netherlands, the US launched the political declaration on the responsible military use of AI in AI and autonomy. And of course, at the same time, the US has been a very constructive and engaged player in the GGE on lethal autonomous weapon systems, and you've contributed a lot to its work since the very beginning. How do you see the political declaration that is based on non-legally binding guidelines and best practices? How does it relate? How does it complement, potentially reinforce, perhaps simplify the process in the GGE? Over to you.
Thank you. Of course, the GGE process talks about one specific arena, right? Lethal autonomous weapons. The AI political declaration is much broader. It's the use of AI across the board in the military sphere. So the two processes are independent and yet not inconsistent, right? In the sense that we have the GGE process continuing, and I think they were able to make good progress in this last session. However, our political declaration is talking about broad uses and where responsible behavior lies with respect to all of the potential military uses of AI and starting the process. And the political declaration was very much the effort to begin a conversation and hopefully to utilize it as a tool to speak with those who are interested in understanding more our perspectives, and hopefully we can understand better the international community's perspectives on where responsible behavior for the use of AI more broadly lies. And so you'll see sort of the efforts in this arena very publicly displayed. We have our Department of Defense publishing its understandings of responsible use of AI. We have our political declaration. We're hoping to hear from others through expert exchanges, through these kind of really useful conferences, through continuing conversations with those colleagues that we work with in the REAIM context, and we're looking forward to South Korea's hosting of the follow-on conference in 2024, so that we can build on our own understanding, but also learn more where other countries are with respect to their concerns about responsible use, where we can collectively build capacity to understand how we effectively can check our AI, can test it, can prevent human biases and human flaws from being built in unconsciously, from building capacity to really perform in a way that maximizes, again, the positive value of AI in the military sphere and minimizes the potentially risk-inducing qualities. So, we've heard a lot of this today. In fact, I think the really helpful panels on the use of AI in the different military domains has been really eye-opening as to where there is confusion as to its application, where there is consensus. And I think through our political declaration, we really are trying to understand if there is a possible arena in which we can start building on those consensus elements of where responsible behavior lies and how we support that. So we see it as consistent with the GGE, but independent and broader than the lethal autonomous weapons question, which of course is a very significant question, and we support that GGE process.
Thank you very much. Marcel de Wink, I have a question for you, and you already spoke about the REAIM summit that the Netherlands hosted earlier this year. In a sense, it was the first of its kind, I think, in really putting this topic of artificial intelligence in the military domain on a more international level and really giving momentum to the discussions. Now, a few months after the summit, what are your reflections on the achievements? How do you feel about the UN and the international community more broadly? How can they build on this process and on the REAIM summit? Over to you, please.
Thanks for the question, Robin. Yeah, I think you're right. It was the first of its kind. And I think it was unique in the sense that we brought together so many different stakeholders. And I think that has really progressed the discussion. So on your point, how do you look back? I think it was very good to have all these different actors together. And that first dialogue, I think, provided a common some groundwork for a common international agenda and a way forward. And that way forward was, I think, also done by the call to action endorsed by more than 50 states. And I think that provided some elements to build on. I think first element would be this is a multi-stakeholder process and should involve not just governments, as I already said, but also industry, academia, NGOs, and others. I think it has also contributed to a better understanding of the risks and benefits of AI. And I think that discussion, and I understand from what others have said that this was also part of your discussions today. I think that discussion needs to progress. And I think the call to action is also important because it emphasizes the development of national strategies and frameworks for the responsible use of AI in the military domain. And I think that's a key part of that discussion. I already said we're extremely pleased with Korea taking the debate forward with Re-aim 24. So we're looking forward to that. And in that context, what the Netherlands is also doing is to have regional consultations on this issue. So, I think we start in Asia and Latin America, and then we build on those conversations, and hopefully, we'll end up with a basis for a discussion on the development of international norms, because I think that is really what should be our goal here. That's not an easy path, but I think it can be done. And I think what was discussed also here in The Hague was the importance of the parameters by international law. We don't just start from scratch, but there is already there are some parameters in place, and I think international humanitarian law is an important, and other elements of international law are really an important basis for that discussion.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm in violent agreement that we're not starting from scratch. And you mentioned the sequence also of the Re-aim events. And on that note, I would like to turn to Ambassador Woo Cho now. And as the Republic of Korea will be hosting, as we just heard, the next Re-aim summit, could you please share some preliminary initial ideas on how you intend to build on the momentum that we currently see, how you build on the success of the first Re-aim summit? Over to you, please. And I'm sorry, you're still muted, sir. We still do not hear you.
Can you hear me?
That sounds good.
Yeah. It was an excellent experience to visit The Hague with my minister to participate in Re-aim Summit last February. I do not want to repeat nor steal the glory of our excellent Dutch host, but indeed the meeting was a great success.
Please go on if you wish.
Yeah, yes, okay.
We plan to build.
We plan to build onto those accomplishments, and we will try our best to prepare for a fruitful second Re-aim Summit. We are still at an initial stage of preparing for the second round of a summit. However, there are some key features from the first summit that needs to be maintained in the second RE-AIM summit. First, the aim should be a global and inclusive process. As we shape the principled approach toward the responsible use of AI in the military domain, we want to make sure that all states, those with or without technologies, those with or without future plan for the AI integration in the military capabilities, are included in this process. It is important that all states understand the potential benefit and risk associated with the use of AI in the military domain. Second, a multi-stakeholder approach is important. We plan to engage with the military, industry, academia, and civil society. We fully understand that the innovation is spearheaded by the civil sector, and interaction with the multiple stakeholders will add much needed insights. Third, we need to build onto the call to action and move toward more concrete action-oriented deliverables. Contributions from participating partners will be crucial in this regard. We are keen to hear what countries see as most imminent to risk and what can and should be done to mitigate those risks. As one way of reaching out to key partners, together with the Netherlands, we will continue cross-regional consultations and host regional workshops to increase mutual understanding on this critical issue. We are also discussing with the Dutch colleagues on formulating global commission to seek recommendations and guidance from leaders and experts. Furthermore, we closely collaborate with the partners to make synergies between other initiatives, such as UK's Global Summit on AI Safety. To sum up, we are still in our early stage. We are very open to ideas and inputs from the participants today about the agenda, deliverables, anything related to the second round of the summit. I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to turn to a second round of specific questions to each of the panelists. And Izumi, again, I'm coming back to you. And if you reflect on what has been done in the realm, for example, of outer space with a joint initiative between the first and the fourth committee, if we consider the number of UN initiatives that now focus on or examine new technologies like the Common Agenda, the Global Digital Compact, surely the upcoming new agenda for peace, how can we avoid silos? How can we make sure from the start that we build strong connections between these various efforts? I know a typical UN question, but I think an important one with all the processes that are there. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Robin, for that question. Indeed, a very important question. And we actually do spend a lot of time working with other parts of the UN system. I just actually, before this panel, I was just attending a big UN coordination meeting, and I'll come back to that. But before going into the UN specifics, I think there is also a need to make sure that we remember there are different types of silos, right? There is a silo within the science and technology issues as it touches the security, peace and security issues. There are silos within the field of disarmament. We tend to discuss issues, in specific weapon categories, nuclear, conventional, science and technology issues. They're all often tackled in their respective portfolios, dedicated multilateral conversations, when in fact the key issue is the conversions or the linkages between those areas of weapon systems. Now, there are also silos between a disarmament and a broader peace and security pillar, including with conflict prevention, mediation, peacekeeping, counterterrorism, etc. Very often it's improving because we've been making efforts. Disarmament work is often not always really well linked to human rights issues, development, and humanitarian areas as well. We are all addressing those issues to make sure that disarmament actually benefits and contributes to this broader priority agenda of the international community and vice versa. Now, there are a number of ways to get better at avoiding those silos in AI governance. As I said, through better coordination across various parts of the UN, and that is definitely happening. When we discuss AI, simply because AI will transform every corner of our society, our daily lives, it's only natural that we think about AI from all substantive aspects. And we, as a UN ODA, we contribute perspectives from peace and security angle, of course. And I think it's this the process that you mentioned, process leading to the Summit of the Future that will take place next year. There is a new agenda for peace. This issue will be very much highlighted. Also, the Global Digital Compact. Those are also intended to put forward to member states a broader perspectives of the impact of AI. So these processes themselves actually will contribute, hopefully, breaking down the silos, and then member states also understanding how those issues really need to be looked at very comprehensively. So, because we are all these, we're in the middle of those Summit of the Future and New Agenda for Peace processes, there was a big virtual meeting, coordination meeting that was initiated by the Tech Envoy's office, where not just the secretariat entities, but also specialized agencies like ITU, like UNESCO, those entities that are actually involved in and looking at the impact of AI more broadly. So I can say that definitely there is a very serious efforts being made to look at AI governance from both civilian and military angles. And I think this level of coordination is definitely going to improve, hopefully, the way we work on. Now, lastly, there is a very important call, you're all aware of that, Secretary General's decision to put together a high-level advisory body on artificial intelligence. Now, exactly what this would do, the mandate of it, the terms of reference is still being worked out. Hopefully, this new body will also serve to make sure that different dimensions, will be looked at, and then we need to absolutely make sure that peace and security dimensions will be very much part of those international communities' thinking. Finally, I just want to say, I mentioned that the different weapon categories. I think states parties of the NPT have held conversations about the need for risk reduction measures to prevent the use of nuclear weapons. And there again, the issues related to AI application is one of the key issues as well. So, those discussions really should take place in that particular platform. And there are a couple of other options where international community, the member states, could consider how to address the linkage of technology and international peace and security. An option could be science and technology monitoring and review mechanisms under the Conference on Disarmament. In the past, there was an example in the CD just prior to the negotiation of CTBT. The CD actually had a group of scientific experts established under the CD. There are also other examples within the disarmament multilateral processes where, for example, the Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons, states recommended establishing an open-ended technical expert group to discuss recent developments in manufacturing, technology, and design. And as we all know, BWC is also going to discuss Scientific Advisory Board. And so there are many different multilateral platforms, starting to actually create some concrete mechanisms. So these efforts will hopefully make sure that the silos will be broken and we will have more comprehensive discussions. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Izumi. And now my next question is to Minister Alolama. And I think it's only a month ago that at the Nationals Connectivity Forum in Abu Dhabi, you called for a global coalition to regulate artificial intelligence and provide the necessary oversight. And you also, I think, made a comparison with what has been done in the nuclear field in the past. But of course, nuclear safeguards, they focus primarily on physical nuclear material, fissile materials. And so in the AI space, the key elements of production and the key components are data, computing capacity, the AI model, the algorithms themselves, and the services and applications that are offered. So in your opinion, which of the elements used in creating AI technology would be most appropriate to be safeguardable, if that's a word, in the way that this has been done in the past with regard to nuclear and other materials? Over to you, please.
Thank you, Robin, for reminding me of that. And honestly speaking, I've had time to reflect on that answer and to reflect as well on that, let's say, thought. There are a few things that I think are clear. The first is that this is not nuclear technology or nuclear weapons. This is a much more delicate issue for us to deal with, and there are certain elements that are not similar to nuclear. But I think one thing is clear: the same way that we got everyone to abide by the nuclear guidelines and the rules that we put in place in the past, and the way that we're able to also scrutinize those who aren't, is the way to go. There are certain things that I would like to make clear. First, there's not a single element that we can control to a large degree to safeguard the development of AI systems. And this process should include as well the governing of all elements that ensure the compliance of the AI systems and that ensures as well that they adhere to safety and ethical standards. What we've seen today, which is very interesting, is that some countries have put sanctions on AI servers or AI compute servers to ensure that they're able to get other countries to abide by the rules or regulations, or at least to abide by whatever causes political tensions between different countries. There's also another thing, which is the actual hardware necessary to train these systems is being not given certain countries or being made scarce to other countries as well. I think there are three main things that we need to think about. The first is data is something that we can try to regulate, but it's very difficult. Companies can scrape all available data that's on the internet or scrape available data that are on certain platforms, and there's not much we can do about that. And a great example of that is OpenAI scraping all the data that was on Twitter or on YouTube or some other platforms without permission. And today, this is a debate where a lot of the players are asking, is this something that is permissible or not? Now, with OpenAI, maybe you can get them to abide by what the requirement, the legal requirement is, but it's a non-state actor that is from a different country. It's very difficult for you to do anything about it. There are certain things we can do, however. The first is, if the hardware itself is embedded with certain safeguards to ensure that AI systems comply with certain ethical guardrails, that will be a first step. I think we need to do that. Another important checkpoint is we need to also ensure that all scientists actually speak about what is happening in this regard to ensure that we have an up-to-date view on what these systems are doing and what they are not doing, and how exactly we can use them. And then finally, there is a possibility for us to ensure that there are certain elements that we can oversee. So I think compute is important. The AI model through the scientists and people working on this space is also very important. And then when it comes to services and applications that are being offered or that are being used, what we can do is always look to scrutinize the code. So having more open source systems is better. I think we need to have a push for all these systems to be open source. And then when we actually scrutinize the code, we'll be able to understand if this is going in the right direction, or if for whatever reason, it's something that might harm us in the future. So I'm all for us making as many of these systems, especially those that are being used globally and widespread, open sourced for anyone to scrutinize and anyone to review.
Thank you very much. And open source is indeed also something that we've heard often throughout the day on the various panels we heard here in Geneva. Mallory, another question to you. We understand that in your view, the political declaration can serve as a strong foundation for the international community to ensure that responsible military uses of AI, and to do this with a view to develop strong international norms of behavior. And what would be possible options to start this political discussion at the multilateral level? How could we ensure that such discussion is inclusive and also representative also of the views of states, and I think this is important, who view themselves more on the receiving rather than on the developing or deploying end of this crucial technology?
I think your point about inclusivity is key, making sure that there's a recognition throughout, as we discussed today, about AI's usefulness to every country in many different contexts, not just in the military arena. And certainly while there are countries that may not view their usage of it as actively right now, it's coming, right? There's this context and an understanding that the benefits of AI are something that should be available to all countries, but we also have to recognize the challenges that AI brings. And so to your question, I would think, awareness raising of all of these issues through conversations like this one, through, some of the UN context conversations that are happening more broadly, I think are useful to sort of develop an understanding for the need. Re-AIM certainly started a good sort of effort to push this forward, and I think continuing that is also really useful. So bringing experts together multilaterally, bilaterally, to talk about mutual understandings and to bring up the questions that arise with respect to why responsible behavior can be helpful to better utilization of AI in a more helpful way, so that we, again, can maximize the benefits. And I think the context of having a multilateral dialogue is a good one to make sure that there's inclusivity, there's a context for answering questions, for raising, concerns with respect to even definitions. And we've seen this across the board in the emerging technology arena, where if there's a different understanding of what the terminology means, it can be a challenge to get to appreciation for how normative work can develop, right? When you don't have a common understanding of what you're talking about or the challenges that emerging technology can provide. In the AI arena, we've talked today again at length about how many potential benefits there are, a better way for the military to more accurately and more appropriately conform with international law, have a better ability to verify, have a more clear understanding of where civilians are present and where they're not, utilizing AI to the maximum effectiveness of its benefits requires us to also understand how we can responsibly minimize the risks. And I think, what we can get to through these kind of conversations, through additional conversations, as mentioned by Ms. Nakamoto, is to develop, again, a common approach, a common understanding. And from the US perspective, our political declaration was our first effort to kick off our understandings of the initial steps that we can take towards responsible behavior, but we don't have the answers. Certainly, we're just trying to get the ball rolling. We're trying not to admire the problem from a distance, but provide something that we can build upon and have that political declaration evolve and change as needed, but address really our listening and our incorporating of the multilateral comments we've heard and the questions in a way that we think can more comprehensively build toward a consensus of responsible behavior. So I think it's our efforts to put something in for the conversation and really try to develop it to something that's more useful multilaterally.
Thank you. And yes, I think inclusivity is key. Another important issue is, I think, diversity of backgrounds and views in these discussions. And so, Marcel, I'll turn it again to you. The call for action that was released and adopted at the Re-AIM Summit in February, it was endorsed by more than 50 states, and it had a number of initiatives that were targeting a very diverse range of actors, from states to industry, academia, and civil society. Now, if we focus on states, how do you see this call to action evolve so far? and also going forward? And how can it be expanded perhaps and made even more inclusive and representative of different views? Over to you, Marcel, please.
Yeah, many thanks. You know, as you said already, I think the re-aim call to action was a first step, and I think we can take it from there. I think what we have seen, and others alluded to that as well, is there's been actually the whole debate in our societies, but also in the international arena, is taking off. So we welcome the initiative by the Secretary General, you know, the Global Coalition on AI. The UK is going to organize a big conference on it, and I think you see a better understanding of the issue, a better understanding of the risks and the challenges, and I think that is incredibly important. And so, in a way, you could argue we have a certain momentum going right now to keep this high on the international agenda. But we have to realize, of course, that artificial intelligence in the military domain is a very sensitive issue. So some countries are reluctant to engage in this debate. Some do want to go really, really fast because they recognize all the risks. And for others, it's still early days. So I think, there's no alternative to organize an inclusive dialogue, to have a comprehensive dialogue on this. The challenge will be actually to keep up with the speed of development of AI in the private sector, and I think that's why a constant engagement with the industry, with NGOs that are concerned on these matters, with academia is crucial to keep all of this up. I already referred to regional consultations that we will hold in various parts of the world. Where possible, we do this together with the Republic of Korea and others, and we really look forward to take that forward. We have no time to lose. So I think the call to action is a broad document that reflects the current state of the international discussion. We would love to move this forward, but again, in an inclusive and comprehensive way to a more political discussion. But that requires time, and we need to make sure that we move forward in a way where other countries feel comfortable with the pace we're taking. I think, again, as I said, there's no alternative to do this in a very inclusive way and in a comprehensive way.
Thank you very much, and time is running this afternoon, so I'm already coming to my final question, and it goes to Ambassador Wu Cho. The Republic of Korea has recently taken significant steps in pursuing AI to enhance its defense readiness in many different areas. And based on your national experience, what do you think are the primary enablers and drivers of the global pursuit of AI for defense? Over to you, Ambassador.
I'd like to offer my personal observation. I think number one is the increasing threat from the North Korea. Second factor is the decreasing population. Recently, countries have enhanced their defense capabilities in response to a rise in threats and declining resources. It becomes crucial to enhance defense efficiency in order to address and overcome those challenges. Using AI in the military domain seems to be most effective and currently most viable option for enhancing defense effectiveness in a short period of time. Speaking from Korea's experience, threats posed by the North Korea's pursuit of nuclear and ballistic missile programs and potential impact of emerging destructive technologies and the emergence of advanced weapon systems like drones significantly amplify our national threat perception. In particular, North Korea is very active in using cyberspace for malicious purposes. It steals cryptocurrency to finance its WMD program and conducts ransomware attacks against critical infrastructure. At the same time, resources for strengthening defense capabilities are continuously decreasing. A typical example is the reduction of the number of military personnel that many countries are facing. In Korea, military personnel is diminishing due to a declining working age population and shortened military service period. It is anticipated that within the 20 years, the number of military personnel will decrease to around 300,000, approximately half of the current level. Against this backdrop, Korea announced the Basic Plan on Defense Innovation 4.0 in this year. Defense Innovation 4.0 is taking a new and creative approach to national defense by harnessing the advantage of cutting-edge science and technology to prepare for a challenging future security environment. The plan for robust armed forces, AI, science, and technology is the key part of this Innovation 4.0 plan. So this is my side story, but I'm also keen to listen to others' views as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And that indeed brings us to the end of this panel and almost to the end of the day in the Innovations Dialogue 23. But first things first, can I please ask the audience to join me in a round of applause for our distinguished speakers? Thank you all very much for sharing your insights here today. And we hope to see you soon again at another UNIDIR event. Now, with this, I will not even attempt to summarize the rich discussions of the day. And sorry, Mallory, if you can just stay on with me, I'll just do the concluding remarks from here. I know it's been a long day. I would just want to share a few observations. First, what we've been trying to do with the format of the Innovations Dialogue this year is really to break the discussions down to a somewhat more granular level and to go beyond. Yes, there are risks and there are opportunities and benefits. Of course there are. But as long as we're discussing that at a rather abstract level, we're not really solving problems. And I think the reason why we're trying to bring together so many different stakeholders in this debate is that we're really trying to identify the real-world problems and what really is in need of fixing. And I very much hope that our approach of taking this to a more granular level and the discussions, the very rich discussions throughout the day, have contributed to that objective. One of my takeaways from listening to the different previous panels, not the concluding panel, is that disruptive innovation when it comes to artificial intelligence is probably most imminent and most likely for the near future in two different domains. One with regard to command support structures, surveillance, intelligence, better informed commanders, AI supported commanders taking decisions. That was one of the upshots. The other is that AI is already playing out in the virtual domain, and I think that's only going to increase and rapidly so going forward. When it comes to cyber operations, whether it's defensive or offensive, I think in terms of scale, scope, intensity, sophistication, depth of penetration through these operations, all this is going to be scaled up through the enabling technology of artificial intelligence, and perhaps most imminently so when it comes to influence operations, manipulative operations in the public opinion space. That's just one observation that I've taken away from the discussions. And the other, and it's just going full circle and brings us back to what I said when I was opening the Innovations Dialogue earlier today, I think all discussions today have emphasized and underlined once again that AI will play a key role in the next transformation phase of military affairs and warfare of the future. And this process is already ongoing. And I think I've seen and heard that on every panel today. But I also think that a lot of good ideas and different options have been put on the table today. There is no doubt that the geopolitical environment is extremely difficult and that moving forward and progress, of course, is a challenge. But at the same time, I think it's also clear that technological evolution in this sense and the adoption of these technologies is not somehow inevitable, or that it necessarily or inherently needs to be uncontrolled or would be irresponsible. There are certainly ways of taking this forwards. There are ways to establish governance models, and the best, and I think still only way to really achieve this is by working together and through collective initiatives going forward that bring together a wide range of very different stakeholders. The idea of the Innovations Dialogue was to contribute to this endeavor, and I very much hope that we have done so throughout the day. With this, I would like to thank once again all of our speakers. I'd like to thank the audience for engaging so actively. I would like to apologize for the audio bug that I think was here that made engagement virtually a bit difficult and challenging. There will be an UNIDIR report on today's discussion, so if you weren't able to follow everything virtually today, the report is coming soon. I certainly would like to extend warm thanks to the security and technology team at UNIDIR, Giacomo Percy Paoli leading it, who have put this conference together. Once again, I'd like to thank our donors, without whom we wouldn't be here today, and hopefully I'll be seeing you latest at the Innovations Dialogue 2024 next year, if not before that. Thank you all very much. Have a good rest of the day. Goodbye.